Now, as I outlined in my digest tonight, the media have the bit between their teeth when it comes to bashing Boris Johnson for the heckling Keir Starmer received on the street yesterday. The Labour leader, who loves to trumpet his record as Director of Public Prosecutions when it suits him, is happy to let the media make him look like the victim when it comes to the PM challenging his CPS for failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile. So tonight I'm asking, is the media wrong to blame Boris Johnson for Keir's mobbing? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. We've also got a Twitter poll up and running right there now, and I'll bring you the results very shortly. But to help you make up your mind, arguing that Boris deserves everything he gets, is the journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov, while defending the PM against a biased media is personality and author Christine Hamilton. So, Christine, look, this feels like a mass overreaction to me. It wasn't pleasant, but it was a bunch of aggrieved hecklers who weren't even targeting Keir Starmer.
No, absolutely right. I'm sure it was extremely unpleasant because if you're in a situation like that, and I've been in a similar situation, you never quite know what's going to happen next. You don't quite know if it is going to turn nasty. So as an aside, I do wonder what the police were doing, by the way, allowing Keir Starmer to walk past the protesters. They must have known they were there. Why didn't they take him through a different door? But that's an aside. No, I think it's grossly unfair to blame Boris. As you say, they were there. They were a group of anti-vaxxers. Some of them are what you might call serial protesters. Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, was there. They were protesting to try and do an Ottawa truckers-style protest, and Keir Starmer happened to walk into their midst, seemingly escorted there by the police. And they were protesting against government policy, and they were shouting at Keir Starmer, why haven't you, the Labour Party, why haven't you opposed the policy? Why are you supporting the government? I have listened to what I've seen on the television over and over again, and I can hear one person mention Jimmy Savile. So the idea that this was all whipped up because of what Boris said, and I'm not an apologist for Boris, and he shouldn't have said it, and he hasn't apologised because he's Boris. But I think the media, they had Boris in their sights, and an awful lot of them thought that by now they would have gunned him down, and somehow he is still hanging on in there. So they are seizing on this, and I think it's actually grossly unfair to blame Boris for that particular mini little scuffle. That's all it was. It was a mini scuffle.
Nina Mishkov, isn't that the point? It's about the media overreaction. It's not that would have been a particularly nice experience for Keir Starmer, but they weren't there targeting him. It was just one person who happened to yell out Savile, another one who happened to yell out something about him protecting paedophiles, but they were a group of protesters looking for any politicians, and they just happened to stumble upon Keir.
Well, Christine said that she didn't think anybody had called out Jimmy Savile's name, and I certainly heard it on the reports, more than one. The thing is, these things escalate, and Boris used that language very, very deliberately. He knew what effect it would have. He knew, by invoking Jimmy Savile's name, that is the most grotesque and gruesome of men who perpetrated horrendous crimes. As Dawn said earlier, I think 500 victims, all of whom have been traumatised by the whole of things. And he did this just to save his own skin. And I believe pumped up by Rees-Mogg, who sat there and went, "Ooh, yeah," when Boris did it. And it's all just a game. And it's not a game. These are people's lives. David Amos's life, Joe Cox's life, Keir Starmer's life. And you may say that's overreacting, but nobody knew at the time that David Amos was going to be murdered. Nobody knew at the time that Joe Cox was being stalked by somebody from a kind of a far right.
Yes, but in those cases, we're talking about terrorists, Nina. This was a group of protesting hecklers.
But the thing is, the more it goes on, the more people are affected by it. And people say, there's no smoke without fire.
Okay, well, Nina, let me ask you this then. Why did the media not lead on the mob that surrounded Jacob Rees-Mogg and his sons, screaming all sorts of things at him? What about when Ian Duncan Smith was attacked with a traffic cone at the Tory party conference just a few months ago, days after Angela Rayner had talked about Tory scum?
I agree, it's awful. But then two wrongs don't make a right.
But that wasn't leading the BBC news.
The media did report it because I read about it.
Wasn't leading the news, Nina. I was reporting on it myself, and it
otherwise,
was
how would I
barely mentioned in the news.
Otherwise, how would I know about it? I know about it. So people know about these things, but two wrongs don't make a right. And, in the House today, they said that, look, this is completely inappropriate. He should never have done it. And he was just desperately trying to save his own skin. He knows he's on the Titanic at the moment. He knows he's got to do something.
You're confident, Nina? You think he's gone?
I think he's on his way out. And it may take a while, but my God, I'll dance on his grave.
Well, that's not nice language, is
No,
it,
it's
Nina?
not. No, it's not nice language.
And
I mean, that's quite hypocritical,
It's
Nina.
not. No,
given you're talking about David Amess and you're talking about Joe Cox, and then you say you would dance on the Prime Minister's grave. See, this is what I think, Christine.
Dan, I used it deliberately. I used it deliberately to show what happens when people say things. I used it deliberately to see whether you would pick up on it.
But, Christine, isn't this the point?
Hang on a
the
minute.
The left are the nasty ones.
Oh, come on,
Sorry,
Dan,
Dan.
that's outrageous. The Tories have always been the nasty party, and we know that.
Christine?
I'm absolutely astonished at Nina that you, and we've known each other for many decades. I'm astonished that you said that. It brings to mind all those terrible people who were chanting when Margaret Thatcher died, something, the witch is dead, the witch is dead. To say you'll dance on his grave is pretty horrendous. Somebody has already mentioned David Lammy describing Leavers as Nazis. And
I used a phrase deliberately to make a point.
Well, you've made a point, and I'm responding to it. Ed Davey urged people in Oxbridge to decapitate Boris. I mean, this is the sort of language which should not be allowed. And it comes back to, you were saying earlier about how these things can escalate, which comes back to what I was saying, is what on earth were the police doing, leading Keir Starmer and David Lammy, by the way, into something like that, because it could have escalated. I mean, they just quietly bundled him into a car, but the whole thing has now been escalated out of all proportion by the media. It was a protest about anti-vaxxing, etc., etc. It was nothing to do with Jimmy Savile or Keir Starmer. The police led Keir Starmer into
Boris invoked Jimmy Savile and paedophilia. And paedophilia has horrendous implications with QAnon in America. And they interviewed somebody on Channel 4 News tonight British, who said all people in power are paedophiles. It's the power. I mean, this whole thing, none of this would have been said if Boris hadn't used those words.
But he did state a fact, Nina. Do you concede that? I know you don't like the fact that he used those words, but he did state a fact that Keir Starmer was running the CPS at the time they decided not to prosecute Jimmy Savile and were instead targeting something like 24 journalists from the Sun.
Yes,
that
but he's very smart, and he knows that the subtlety of that. The subtlety of that was that Keir Starmer was never ever told about it as a case. It was never brought to him. It wasn't. No,
but he claims credit for all of the good things the CPS does.
But then also he was the one when after Jimmy Savile died and the horror of it was revealed. He was the one who demanded an inquiry and then apologised for the service not doing its job. Now, what more can the man do? You cannot say that he has not apologised for what he did. But the thing is, Boris using these words in a subtle fashion, and they are subtle, because you can say, yes, Keir Starmer was responsible for what happened within the CPS while he was in charge of it, and Jimmy Savile was not charged or arrested or prosecuted. The point being that people will just hear that Keir Starmer failed, that he helped a paedophile, and then the lunatic fringe will then extrapolate that into he helped the paedophiles. Maybe he's a paedophile himself. So, the whole QAnon thing. So
I think what this debate proves is just how politicised the whole area has become. That was the broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov.
Can I just make one point?
Yes, final word, Christine, quick word.
One quick point. Nina said she thought that I said earlier that nobody mentioned Savile. I said one person. I only heard one person mention it.
I thought you said nobody.
So I just want to put that.
No, I only said one person as well. Good point.
And I'm very fond of Christine. I really am. But we are on opposing sides, and that's that.
Yes, and that's what we're here for on this channel. We have Spirited but respectful debate. Christine Hamilton, Nina Mishkov, thank you both so much.